Hey everybody, it is Stealth from Topped Off, and today I want to take a look at the first mythic encounter in the Emerald Nightmare, and that is, of course, Nythendra. Now, I'm not going to go over all the heroic mechanics. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what this video is about. This video is about helping our guild, in particular, succeed in changing this from a 1 or 2 day nightmare into a 30-minute success. So let's take a look at the one mechanic that actually matters, that actually changes from heroic to mythic, and I'm going to go over step by step how we can change that from a mechanic that can wipe us into something that we can control and turn into a quick success. So let's talk about it. I have pulled up the adventure guide, and you're looking at the 3 spells here that actually matter in the fight. Infested, I'm assuming you all know what that is, so I'm not going to touch on it. Infested Mind is the one change from heroic to mythic. Basically, if you get 10 stacks of Infested, you become mind controlled. Once you're mind controlled, you start casting Spread Infestation. It hits for 500,000 damage, or 10 million damage to the raid, and it gives everybody a stack of Infested. If you become mind controlled, you can be interrupted, you can be stunned, you can be CC'd, and that needs to happen. So, you're probably wondering, how do I avoid getting mind controlled? Well, don't stand in shit. But 2, you really can't. Everybody's going to get mind controlled. It's part of the fight. And what's going to make us either wipe over and over again or succeed in the first couple pulls is if you understand how and why you get mind controlled and how and when you break mind control. If you accidentally get mind controlled in the fight, we're going to wipe. If you forcefully take control of your own destiny and get mind controlled at the right times, we're going to succeed very quickly. So I'm going to pull us over to YouTube, and I want to take a look at an alpha group that did a pretty good job in the first 2 phases. I'm going to show you where they succeeded and where they failed. Let's take a look. Okay, for the first 50 seconds of this fight, nothing happened. So I'm going to take that time right now to go over a couple of things that are pretty important to our success. The first of those is that when this fight first came out on alpha, whenever the rot went off, it took a couple seconds before the pulse actually began. And so what guilds were doing is they were stacking very, very tightly, knowing that 2 players were going to get rot. And when they got rot, they had 1 or 2 seconds to get out of the group before any damage was done. But Blizzard changed their minds, and they made the pulse active immediately. So once somebody has rot, they immediately pulse the second they get it. So if everybody's stacked, then we're getting 2 stacks of rot and infested unnecessarily. So we cannot stack on this fight when rot is going off. You loosely spread in a quarter of the room from the middle of the dragon to the front, kind of like this group is doing. I wish they were spread out a little bit more, but we should be as a group. And nothing happens for the first 50 seconds of the fight. So if you notice, rot just went off on the warrior and the DK. And I'm going to stop and show you that the warrior and the DK had rot on them. They moved out of the group, and they now have 4 stacks of infested. They accidentally gave a stack to the monk and to the warlock because they were stacked too tightly. As soon as that is done, the tank debuff is going to go out. The warrior just got the tank debuff. He's moving out of the group. When that explodes, everybody gets a stack of infested. So we've got 2 people with 5, 2 people with 2, and 16 people with 1. After this, the breath immediately goes out. It's a cycle from rot to tank debuff to breath. So what this group did that was smart and right, and what we have to do aggressively, is that, in my opinion, once somebody hits 6 stacks of debuff, they've got to get mind controlled. And the reason why is because once rot goes out, it is guaranteedly going to give 4 stacks. If a player has 6, 7, or 8 stacks of infest, and they get rot on them, and they have to leave the group and go out to Africa, they're going to get mind controlled away from the group. It is better to mind control when you have 6 or 7 or 8 while you're in melee range or close to the group so that we can CC you and stun you than to have that happen when you're out of way. And that's the decision that they make. And all 3 players that had high stacks got mind controlled. They AoE stunned them, and they burned them, and it was no problem. It resets the stacks. And the reason why that's so important is because the person that had high stacks was the warrior, and he just got rot again. So if he had 6 stacks before and he wouldn't have cleared, he would have gotten to 10. And rather than being mind controlled in the melee, he would have been mind controlled in range, which is a much worse situation to be in. So the rot just went out, the tank debuff just went out, in a cycle just like it always does. Now they get another stack, and guess what's next? The breath. Players need to be aware of this cycle so that they can quickly move and not get unnecessary stacks when the breath goes out. Some people do a really bad job right here, one of them being the rogue, one of them being the monk, and one of them being the tank. They accidentally get too many stacks. That's not a problem, and here's why. Because after that breath goes off, there's 15 to 20 seconds where nothing happens. I mean nothing. And if they wanted to, and they were being intelligent, that rogue, that monk, and that tank, who doesn't have the stacks yet, but will get them in just a second, would have aggressively mind-controlled themselves, gotten knocked off, cleared their stacks, and they would have been fine. But because they don't do that, eventually, here in about a minute and a half, they're going to wipe the raid. So they enter into the bug phase. I don't want to touch on this. I don't want to cover it. I want to skip it. I don't think that you should be getting mind-controlled on purpose in this phase. I think it's too dangerous. You need to just avoid things and pop your cooldowns. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happens after the bug phase. Okay, bug phase is over. They're stacking up. And what we see is that the rogue and the monk have 9. The tank has 8. Now, if they would have cleared beforehand, this wouldn't be a problem. But now we have a problem. And here's why. Because the tank debuff is going to go off, which means that no matter what, even if they don't get rot, even if that rogue and that monk don't have an accident happen, the tank debuff is going to 100% give them a mind control. But guess what happens right after the tank debuff goes off? The breath. So if you're in the middle of a mind control and the breath goes off, you are fucked. And that's exactly what happens. The tank debuff goes off. The rogue and the monk are mind-controlled. They're getting breathed on. They're mind-controlling other people because they're not being interrupted, and the group wipes. So basically, what we saw was 2 flawless phases, and the area where they failed and where they broke down is that they didn't aggressively clear the mind control after that second breath. If they would have done so, everybody would be alive right now. The second mistake they made was they just weren't ready for the mechanics. And each and every time that a breath went off, people got breathed on. Well, guess what? It's the rot, followed by the tank debuff, followed by the breath. If you know those 3 mechanics, you won't get high stacks. When you do get high stacks, if you know the right time to clear, which is after the breath, you can get those cleared easily and safely. If we do those things and we stagger when we do the mind control, we're going to knock this fight out in 30 minutes, and we're going to move on to the next. So I'm going to throw that out there. I want you guys to think about this. If you have any suggestions or you think I'm completely wrong, let everybody know. If you think I'm right, then let's do this. All right? I'll see you guys for the next chat. Bye.